Hey there, and a warm welcome to this new channel. Here I'll be sharing my own stories that I've written and created myself, unless otherwise stated. I hope you'll be just as captivated by them as I am. So, welcome. Let's get started now. The fog over Whitechapel was alive. Thick as wet, filthy cotton, it crept through the cracks of the window and settled on the skin like a cold sweat. It tasted of coal smoke. It carried the river's sour breath. Along Thrall Street, the gas lamps became pale yellow blots, swollen by darkness before their light could be born. Lillian Grace sat in a third-floor room where the tallow candle's trembling flame threw her shadow against the damp, peeling wall. She was 24, yet her hands bore the life of an old woman, chapped, red-swollen, split open by the needlework that chewed through her days and nights. Her hair had once fallen like a reddish-brown river down her back. Now it was shorn in uneven clumps, brutally hacked off with kitchen shears. A necessary sacrifice in the factory on Flower and Dean Street, where lice thrived better than people. She no longer missed it. It had been cut away along with so much else. From the bed in the corner came a cough, at first dry and scraping, then wet enough to sound like something tearing inside. Elsa turned in the darkness, and the sound passed through Lily like a blunt knife. It was the same cough that had taken her father the previous winter, the factory dust that had eaten into his lungs until they became a hollow, rattling ruin. Now tuberculosis gnawed at her mother with the same stubborn teeth. Lily touched the coins on the table. They were cold against her fingertips, thin as though they were being worn away. She did not need to count them. 3 shillings and 6pence. The rent took 3. 6pence remained, for food, for coal, for medicine that did not heal. It was a mathematics that could not be won. Hope lay beside the coins, a stiff sheet of paper bearing the stamp of Toynbee Hall, its edges yellowed as if it had already been handled too often. Ashford Hall, near Ripon, North Yorkshire. Scullery maid, £14 a year, board and lodging included. In 2 days she would board the train at King's Cross, 200 miles north, alone, to an estate she had never seen, to serve a man she knew only by whispers. Lord Edmund Harrington. The girls at the factory had murmured when they heard she had been given the place. Rich as a king, one had said, with a mixture of envy and fear. A recluse, muttered another. Never looks people in the eye. They say the last girl vanished in the winter, whispered a third, so softly the words felt like a breath across the back of the neck. Lily pushed the voices away. Rumors fed no one. £14 a year did. She rose stiffly from the chair, her joints protesting as though she were far older than 24. It was time for supper. In the small kettle over the dying embers, 2 shriveled potatoes boiled, their skins split by the heat. She poured hot water over the tea leaves, the 4th time they had been used, and the water turned only a pale gray, carrying the taste of sour metal dust. She mashed the potatoes with a little water and salt. The smell of earth and damp grain mingled with the sweet, piercing scent of sickness from the bed, a smell that settled over the room like a thin blanket no one could shake off.
Lily?
Elsa's voice snapped in the air like a thread drawn too tight, ready to break. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, and the mattress complained beneath her. Her mother's hand was fever-hot and disturbingly light, like a brittle bone found in the woods.
You're not leaving.
Her eyes were milky, her gaze fixed on something Lily could not see. Only for a little while, Mother, Lily lied softly. It's a good place, in the country. I'll send money.
For Christmas?
The word escaped as a breath. I'll send money for coal, Lily said, more firmly than she had meant to. And proper medicine. Perhaps a little meat. The lie tasted of old soot clinging to her tongue. Later, when her mother's breathing had grown shallow and slipped into a restless sleep, Lily remained at the table. The train ticket lay before her. 3rd class. A single journey out and no way back. Beside it lay the postal order she had already filled in, the numbers neat despite her trembling fingers. 7 shillings to Mrs. Elsa Grace, 12 Thrall Street. 2 days left in this filthy, suffocating, strangely comforting grave. Then the train, a steaming iron beast that would drag her north whether she wished it or not. Somewhere up there, beyond the stone walls and the mist-covered moors, Lord Harrington was waiting. And his secrets. The air on York Road was so sharp that every breath froze to smoke before it had left her lips. The cold bit through the thin shawl and into her skin like teeth. Lily stood on the wet cobblestones with her small cardboard case, a flimsy parcel held together by a single length of string. Inside lay everything she owned, gathered into one shamefully small pile. A clean cotton dress, a sweater with a mended hole in the sleeve, the ticket, the postal order. The 2 shillings she had left were knotted at her throat, heavy as guilt. She had left Whitechapel at 5 o'clock, 4 miles on foot through a London that still slept, as if the city itself were trying to forget its own misery. The journey there had been a walk through the outer courts of hell. She left Thrall Street while the gas lamps still flickered like dying spirits in the muddy dawn, their weak light trembling as though it were trying to hold her back. At Bishopsgate, a girl lay pressed against a damp brick wall, perhaps 14, her body drawn in on itself as if trying to make itself smaller than its hunger. Her lips were blue, her eyes hollowed out by cold and sleepless nights. "A penny, miss," she whispered, "for a piece of bread." Lily pressed a halfpenny into her hand, all she dared to give, and the girl's skin was so cold that Lily flinched as though she had touched a corpse. The girl took the coin without a word, without a glance, and returned to her folded silence. As she approached Liverpool Street, the city began to stir, like an animal stretching its sleeping body. Horse trams rattled past, their wheels grinding like teeth, the carriages packed with grey faces that already looked as though they had surrendered the day. A newsboy stood on the corner, his voice slicing through the morning cold. "Morning Leader! Lord Asquith promises pensions for widows. Jack the Ripper terror in Whitechapel again." The words struck her like gusts of frozen air. London never released its monsters. It felt as though they still followed her in the shadows. As she neared King's Cross, the fog rolled in like a living wall, thick and yellow as old wound pus. It tasted of sulphur and coal dust, settling on her skin as a sticky film. Drunken men staggered out of pubs that had opened at dawn, their laughter low and slurred, as though it crawled from their throats rather than their mouths. One of them seized her arm. His hand was hard and damp, and his face came so close she saw the black gaps where teeth should have been.
"Where are you going, sweetheart? A kiss for a shilling?"
The breath that struck her stank of gin, rotting gums, and something older. Lily tore herself free, her heart beating like a bird trapped inside an iron pipe. "I have a train," she whispered, not as an answer, but as a charm she clung to. The station rose before her like a blackened iron monster, its arches and girders curved like the ribs of something that had once breathed and was not yet entirely dead. The steam engines hissed in their queues, hot and impatient, vomiting heavy columns of smoke that struck the glass roof and slid back down as dirty mist. Conductors called out the destinations in voices that cut through the air, metallic, unyielding.
York, Doncaster, Leeds, all aboard?
Lily stood at the entrance to third class. The case hung from her hand like a weight of lead, and her legs trembled, as though the iron floor of the station were stealing the warmth straight from her marrow. She saw the wealthy ladies at first class, wrapped in furs so soft they seemed to belong to another world. Their hats carried feathers that quivered in the morning air, and the footmen bearing their luggage moved with a silent certainty, as if the ground itself bent to them. A sharp, burning stab of envy cut through Lily, and the shame followed at once, just as keen. Along the platform, children sold matches and apples, their faces blackened with soot, their eyes dulled by hunger. She had been one of them. She could still remember what it was to hold a box against her chest, as if it were her last scrap of warmth. From the corner of her eye, she saw a policeman kick a sleeping man in the gutter, hard, indifferent, as though the man were nothing more than a stone in the way. The law was not her protection. It kicked downward, always downward. She caught a reflection in a puddle of filthy water, its surface broken by flakes of soot drifting like dead insects. The face that stared back was pale, sharpened by hunger, dirt traced along her cheeks like old tears. But in her eyes there was something hard, something that refused to go out despite the cold, despite the city, despite everything. "This is who I am now," she thought, "but I will not remain here." It was 10 minutes to 8 when she found her carriage, third class. The door shrieked as she pulled it open, and the heat inside struck her like a damp wall. The wooden benches were nothing but rough planks, cold as gravestones, and the air, a mixture of coal smoke, sweat, and stale tobacco, lay heavy enough to taste. She took a seat by the window. The old woman beside her held a basket of eggs in her lap, the smell of straw and feathers mingling with the stench of the other passengers. The woman's shoulder pressed warm against her own, too close, but there was nowhere to move. At precisely 8 o'clock, the whistle tore through the air, a sharp metallic scream that made the whole carriage stiffen. The iron beast lurched, a violent wrench as if it were tearing itself free from the station's grip, and then it began to move. London slid past the window, chimneys rising like blackened fingers, church spires veiled in fog, a sea of gray withdrawing yet never entirely gone. Lily leaned her forehead against the cold, trembling glass. Tears burned, stubborn and hot, but she blinked them away. Pride held them back. She refused to let the city see her break. "For Mother," she whispered, so softly the words almost caught in her throat. They felt more like a prayer than a promise, a breath she had to keep alive by sheer will. "For us." The train cut on northward, and the landscape changed slowly, but the feeling did not. Somewhere ahead, beyond veils of mist and stretches of stone moor, something was waiting. Lord Harrington. His shadow lay over her already, long, silent, and inescapable. The train halted with a roar of metal against metal, a sound that drove straight through the marrow and remained there like an echo. York Station rose before her like a Gothic vault of soot-darkened stone, arched like an enormous jaw. Clouds of steam rolled up from the tracks and coiled around the pillars like pale spirits, unwilling to release their hold on the earth. Lily stepped down onto the platform, the cardboard case chafing in her hand, her heart beating so hard she felt it in the hollow of her throat. All around her was noise, conductors shouting, trunks flung onto carts, horses outside snorting as if they too despised the smoke. And there, in the midst of the tumult, stood Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, a severe woman dressed in black cotton, her back straight as a sword blade. Her hat was pinned with a long, slender needle that glinted like a dagger in the misted light. She held a folded parasol in her hand as though it were a weapon and she were waiting for an excuse to use it. She stood by the exit and looked out over the crowd with a gaze so cold it cut through the smoke. Her eyes moved across the passengers like a measurement, not of their faces, but of their deficiencies. Lily approached, her legs trembling, as if the stone platform itself were drawing the strength out of her.
Miss Grace?
Mrs. Hargreaves' voice was not simply hard. It was honed, like metal sharpened against stone. It did not wait for an answer. It demanded surrender. Lily nodded, quickly.
Yes, Mrs.
Hargreaves' eyes moved over her, slowly, top to bottom, like cold instruments, measuring, weighing, the worn dress, the rough hands, the thin face. At last her gaze stopped at Lily's eyes, and something in her expression hardened, as if she were testing whether the girl would crack under the pressure. "You are younger than I expected," she said, her voice dry as dust. "But you look strong. We have no use for weak girls at Ashford Hall." Not a compliment, a warning. Mrs. Hargreaves turned on her heel with a precision a military parade might envy. "Follow me," she said, without looking back to see if Lily did. "We do not waste time." Outside the station, a black lacquered carriage waited in the gray light, gleaming like a polished coffin. The silver fittings caught the dim afternoon, cold, almost indifferent. The horses stamped at the ground, their breath rising in pale clouds in the frozen air. The coachman, dressed in dark livery, opened the door without lifting his eyes. Something in his bearing said the words were not his to use. Lily stepped in. The leather was hard, cold. The smell of it, mixed with old wood and oil, sat heavy in her lungs. Foreign. She didn't know yet whether to trust it. Mrs. Hargreaves sat opposite, back straight as a spear, hands folded neatly in her lap, as if she carried an invisible discipline inside her body. The carriage lurched forward with a low, rolling shudder, and the spires of York began to slip away behind them, first twisted by fog, then swallowed entirely. The market sounds faded, as if someone had drawn a curtain across the world. Before them opened the North Yorkshire moors, vast, mist-wrapped, a wilderness where the wind sang low through the heather, and the stones rose like ancient sentinels. The air was raw. It smelled of damp, and iron, and something Lily couldn't name, something that made her pull her shawl tighter at her throat. The wheels ground against gravel, a low, relentless rhythm, driving her further and further from everything she knew. Mrs. Hargreaves began to speak, slowly, clearly, in a voice entirely free of warmth.
You begin as scullery maid, lowest rank in the house. You scrub, you carry, you disappear. If you obey, perhaps one day you may rise, but never beyond kitchen maid. Understand that.
She let a small, cold breath pause the sentence. The carriage rattled on through the fog as she continued.
You have half an hour free after church on Sundays. You attend St. Mary's. You sit at the back. You do not speak. You do not look up. You pray.
She turned her head slowly, as if calibrating Lily in profile.
No complaints, no theft, no lies. The Master and Servant Act applies here.
The words fell heavy as chains. Break any of this, and you will be dismissed without pay. You may be prosecuted. You may be imprisoned. She did not blink. It is the law. Mrs. Hargreaves leaned forward until Lily could feel her breath, dry and cold, like old paper. Her eyes narrowed to two thin lines, gleaming with something that was not anger, something colder than that, pure, disciplined, conviction.
Lord Harrington is master of life and death at Ashford Hall. His word is law.
A small, almost imperceptible smile pulled at the corner of her mouth, as if she were quoting sacred text.
And my word is his. You obey, or you cease to exist.
The silence in the carriage settled over them like a lid, heavy enough that Lily could feel it pressing down on her shoulders. The horse's hooves were the only sound, a muffled, steady drumming echoing through her chest. "You will have a room in the attic," said Mrs. Hargreaves at last, as calmly as if reading from a book of regulations. "A bed, a hook for your dress, a chest." The words fell like small stones. "Breakfast, porridge and tea. Dinner, potatoes, cabbage, occasionally meat scraps. Evening, soup and bread. A measuring glance from the side. No visitors, no letters except to your mother, and those pass through me." Her voice dropped lower then, but harder. "No men. A final closing blow. No secrets." Lily sat perfectly still, as if someone had forced her into silence. Her fingers curled tight in her lap, so tight that her nails pressed through the fabric. Her heart was beating fast, but it was no longer pure fear. It was something thicker, darker. A decision that felt more like a wound than like strength. She turned her gaze to the window. The moors rolled past like a sea of gray, wild, bare. The fog lay heavy over the ground, swallowing the horizon, and the standing stones rose like ancient figures watching her in silence, guardians of a land that did not belong to her. "This is my prison," she thought. but also my last chance to survive. The carriage turned onto a long, winding road where the trees bent inward, as if trying to keep the light from reaching what lay beyond. The sound of the wheels changed, became hushed, almost reverent, and out of the fog, Ashford Hall emerged, slowly, as if the building chose when to reveal itself. The dark stone facade rose from the earth with a weight that made it feel as though the ground itself carried the burden, unwillingly. The towers reached toward the sky like sharp fingers, and the black windows sat deep in the walls, sightless, dark, not empty, just watching. A cold shiver moved along Lily's spine. The manor did not look like it was welcoming her. It looked like it had been waiting for her. Mrs. Hargreaves smiled, a thin, rigid pull across her lips, as if her face had not quite been built for such movements.